The coin was on the floor on my side of the yellow line, and the thing on the other side of the glass wanted me to pick it up. It had been standing there for close to 20 minutes, not moving much. Its coat hung off it the way a coat hangs off a nail, and its hands were down at its sides, and every so often one of the fingers would tap the floor once and go still again, like it was counting off a total only it could hear. The quarter was a foot inside the line. It must have rolled there. I had not seen it drop. I had looked up from the little black security monitor, and there it was, a single silver coin sitting in the acrylic shine of the safety line, and the customer on the far side had its head tilted down at it and then up at me, and it said, in a voice like a door dragged over grit, that I had dropped my change. I had not dropped any change. I do not keep change on my side. The whole point of the booth is that nothing of mine ever ends up out there, and nothing of theirs ever ends up in here. I told it the coin was not mine. It said it was. It said it had seen it fall out of my apron when I stood up, and it would be a shame, it said, for the young man to lose money he had worked for. It said the word worked slow, the way words come out when the mouth around them does not know what they mean. The fluorescent tubes over the folding tables were doing the thing they do at 3 a.m, that flat green hum I could feel in my back teeth, and under it, faint, coming up through the wall behind me where the utility hallway runs. I could hear the pipes start to tick. Not the good tick. Not the settling of a building at night. The other one, the copper knocking against itself inside the wall, the way a kettle knocks right before it goes, and I knew if I looked at the steel door at the end of that hallway, I would see it sweating. A bead of water standing on cold iron. The boiler had woken up, because the boiler always knows before I do. I kept my hands flat on the counter where it could see them. I told it again the coin was not mine, and that I was not going to reach for it, and that it could pick up whatever it liked on its own side, but the floor inside the yellow line was not its side and never would be. It smiled at that. I have had 4 years to think about the way it smiled, and I still do not have a clean word for it. Its mouth opened, and there were too many things inside it, and none of them were teeth, in the way teeth are supposed to sit in a mouth. And it did not lunge, it did not so much as lean. It just let me look for a second, and then closed its mouth and picked the smile up off its face and folded it away. The pipes went quiet. The bead of water on the steel door, if it had been there, dried up. Out on the road, a set of headlights swung across the front glass, throwing the whole white room yellow for a second, and a long-haul rig came down off the pass with its Jake brake stuttering, and it slowed like it might pull in, and then it did not, and the sound of it went away east toward Toll Creek and was gone. When I looked back, the customer was gone from the line. It had gone back to whatever machine it was renting. The quarter was still on the floor inside the yellow paint, exactly where it had been, and it stayed there until sunrise. And at sunrise, I got the long-handled dustpan, and I swept it out under the gate and off the counter without ever putting my hand past the line, and I dropped it in the coffee can I keep for exactly that. And there were 41 other coins already in the can. That was a Tuesday, or the part of a Tuesday that happens when the rest of the world is asleep. It was not even a bad night. By then I could tell the bad ones apart, and this was not one. My name is Cole Merritt, and for a little over 4 years I have worked the graveyard shift at a laundromat for monsters. The place is called Spin Dry, though the sign out front only ever managed to keep half of itself lit, so from the road at night it just says a word that is not quite a word, a long red smear of neon in the fog. It sits on a gravel and asphalt pull-off along Route 22 up in the Oregon Cascades, where the highway climbs toward the pass, and the hemlock comes right down to the shoulder on both sides and stands there dripping. The nearest wide spot in the road is a place called Toll Creek, 9 miles east, a gas station and a bar and a church that share one blinking light. The nearest town of any real size is a lot farther than that. In the daytime, it looked like nothing at all. A sad little cinder block box that should have closed when the mill did. 12 washers and a wall of dryers behind plate glass, gone soft with age, a change machine, a token machine, a couple of folding tables bolted down so nobody would walk off with them, a yellow bug light over the door. That is all it looks like. The interstate runs the long way around these mountains now, 40 miles south, and it takes almost everybody with it. So we do not get many ordinary customers after dark. The ones we do get are the reason Spin Dry stays open. I found the job on an index card thumbtacked to the corkboard inside the Toll Creek station, back when I was sleeping in my truck in the church lot and telling myself it was temporary. I had been let go from the last real work in the valley, a graveyard stocking gig at a distribution warehouse that closed its doors and moved everything to a bigger building 2 states away. I had a bad knee from 10 years of that kind of work and about $600 and a truck that was going to need a water pump before the first hard freeze. The card said night attendant wanted good pay, room included, 4 nights off a week. There was a number. I called it from the payphone that the station somehow still keeps working, and a woman answered on the first ring like she had been sitting with her hand on the receiver. Her name was Ada Vance. She owned the place. She sounded like she was somewhere in her 60s, and like she had already run the whole conversation in her head before I called. She did not ask me about my work history. She asked me 3 things. She asked if I drank on the job. She asked if I spooked easy. And she asked if I could do a thing I did not understand yet, right away, the first time I was told to do it, without stopping to argue about why. I said no to the first and no to the second and yes to the third, because I needed the money and because those seemed like the answers a person gave. Then she asked me one more. She asked if I had ever seen anything in my life I could not explain. I told her the truth, which was no. And she said that is going to change, in a flat voice with no drama in it at all, like she was telling me where the bathroom was. I thought she was one of those lonely older people who talk in riddles because nobody comes around anymore. I found out different my first night. She met me in the lot at dusk and walked me through the front doors, and the first thing she did was show me the booth. It is at the back of the room, up 2 steps, a little raised box of counter and glass. The glass is not the flimsy stuff. It is the thick, milky kind they put in check cashing places and gun stores, and it goes floor to ceiling with a talk-through grill and a sliding steel tray at the bottom for money and tokens and keys. Behind the glass, there is just enough room for a stool, a mini fridge, a space heater, a little bank of security monitors, and a cot folded against the wall. There is a landline phone. There is a red button under a plastic guard that I did not ask about that first night, and should have. And running along the floor, all the way around the base of the booth, sealed right into the linoleum, there is a line of thick yellow paint about as wide as my hand. Ada crouched down over her knees, slow, and told me to look close at it, but not to touch it. Up close, I could see the paint was not just paint. There was grit worked all through it, coarse and gray and glittering in places. She said it was 3 things mixed into the acrylic while it was still wet, and she named them the way she might have named the ingredients of a dish her own grandmother used to make. Salt, the cheap industrial kind that comes in the 50-pound sacks for softening water and salting ice. Iron, filed down cold from old tools, never heated. She was firm about that, never heated. And dirt. She did not soften the last one. Graveyard dirt, she said. From a boneyard up the pass that nobody has buried anyone in since before the First War, and she got it herself, and I was never to ask her how or from where, because she would not tell me. She stood back up with a hand on the counter, and she looked at me, and she said the rule that the whole job hangs on. After the token machine locks at midnight, and until the sun comes up over the ridge, I was to stay inside that line, all of me. I could sit on the stool or lie on the cot or stand at the counter. I could reach for the phone or the fridge or the button, but no part of me was ever to cross the yellow paint. Not a hand, not a foot, not to help, not to pick anything up, not for any reason a voice on the other side of the glass could think of to give me, and she promised me they would think of a lot of them. If a customer dropped something, the customer could bend down and get it. If somebody looked like they were dying out in the lot, I could pick up the phone and call the county, though she said the county took 40 minutes to come up the grade on a good night, and by then it would be over one way or the other. I was never, ever to go out that door and into the lot myself after midnight. Inside the line, I was the one thing in the building that could not be touched. Outside it, she said I was just meat that knew how to make change. Then she told me why a laundromat. I had been turning that over since the phone call, honestly, because of all the things to build in the middle of nowhere and keep running all night. A coin laundry is close to the bottom of the list. She said it used to be different. She said there was a time when a thing that lived in the woods could come down, do what it did, and go back up, and the worst it had to worry about was a farmer with a lantern. That time is gone. She said the word for what killed it was cameras. There is a camera on every doorbell now, and a camera in every truck cab, and a camera strapped to a tree on every game trail in the state. And there are cameras up in the sky that can read the date off a coin if the light is right. A thing that hunts leaves a mess, and a mess gets found, and what gets found gets put on the internet. And so the old ones learn to be careful the same as everybody else. They learn to pass. And a thing that wants to pass for human has a problem that no amount of being careful in the woods will fix. It's clothes. She said it plain, standing there in the buzzing white light with the machines dark and quiet behind her. When the thing that walks on 4 legs stands up and walks on 2, its coat and its boots come back crusted with what it did. Black hair matted into the seams, mud that is not just mud, splinters of bone worked into the flannel. When the dead travel, they weep a grease out of the skin that rots cloth from the inside, and if they do not strip it and boil it, it eats through to the parts of them a person is not supposed to see. The ones that live under the mountain carry an acid clay on them that has to come off before it comes off with the scale underneath. None of that goes through a machine in a house. A home washer clogs on the first load, and the drain smells like a killing floor, and the neighbor notices, and then there is a camera pointed at that house too. But a commercial extractor, a real one, the kind that spins fast enough to take an arm off, running hot enough to scald, with the industrial soap and the hot bleach, that will strip a thing back down to something that can stand in line at a gas station in the daylight and buy a coffee and have nobody look at it twice. So they come to spin dry. From a long way off, some of them, they come to wash the evidence of what they are out of the only clothes that let them pretend they are not. And Ada Vance's family has been taking their tokens for 3 generations and asking no questions and following the rules and staying alive. She walked me through how the place actually runs while the light was still good, before the first of them came, and most of it is as dull as any other job until the part where it is not. In the daytime, in the evening, the machines take quarters like any laundromat in the world, and the token machine by the door turns bills into coins for the ones who come to wash their work clothes and go home. But at midnight, the token machine locks itself on a timer I do not control and cannot override, and from midnight until dawn, not one machine on that floor will start on its own for anybody. After midnight, the only way a drum turns is if I turn it from the booth, off the little panel by the monitors. Ada was firm on why. It means that, after dark, nothing gets the protection of a life cycle unless I give it to them. It means I decide every night who is a guest and who is just standing in the room. She said the day I understood that the panel was the most dangerous thing in the booth, more than the phone, more than the red button I had not asked about yet, was the day I would start being good at the job. It took me a while. It is a heavy thing to sit behind a switch that decides who a room full of monsters is allowed to touch. I asked her where they all came from. She said everywhere, and a long way. There are not many places like Spin Dry left, she said, and the way she said it told me there were some, and that she knew of them, and that the people who ran them were the closest thing she had to colleagues, and she had never met one of them face to face. Word passes among the guests somehow, though most of them do not talk and none of them advertise. And a thing that needs its clothes made clean will drive or walk or come however it comes from 3 counties over, because this is where it gets done and no questions asked. Some of them plan their whole year around it. The dead family in their July, the diggers, and the first hard freeze. They are more regular than the ordinary customers. In truth, an ordinary man washes his clothes when he runs out of clean ones. A thing that has to strip the evidence of what it is out of the only skin it has to wear in daylight does not miss its appointment. There are windows down low along one wall, old ones. And part of my job in the morning after certain guests is to cover them before noon, because there are things that rent the dark parts of the building and cannot have the sun come in and find them. I keep cut squares of blackout board for it, labeled "leaning behind the booth." It sounds like a small thing. It is not a small thing to the one it is for, and I learned to do it right and on time, because the day I am careless with the boards is the day something that trusted me to keep the sun off. It decides I am not worth trusting, and a thing like that deciding I am not worth trusting is not a problem I would live through. I asked about the boiler last, the way she had told it to me last, because I could not stop looking at the steel door. She did not have much. Her grandfather bought the lot in the years after the First War, she said, meaning to run a filling station, and the boiler was already in the ground in a brick pit, older than any record of the place, and the men he hired to pull it out would not finish the job. She would not say what happened to them, so he built over it instead, and the building went up around the pit, and somewhere in those first years he learned what the rest of her family has known since, which is that the thing in the pit keeps a kind of order, and that the order has rules, and that somebody who learns the rules and keeps them can make a living in the space the order leaves. 3 generations of her blood have kept those rules and taken that money and covered those windows and turned that panel, and the ones who did it right got old, and the ones who did it wrong are a word and a date in the back of a locked book. She told me all of it flat, no wonder in her voice, the way a farmer talks about the kind of weather that kills stock, because to her it was not strange. It was just the family business. The strange was all my side of the glass, and she watched it come up in my face that first hour with a look that was almost kindness, because she had seen it come up in the mirror once herself, a long time ago, before it wore down into the plain gray patience she ran the place with now. That was the first hour of my first night. I remember thinking I would finish out the shift to be polite and then get in my truck and drive back down to the valley and take my chances sleeping in the church lot. I remember thinking the old woman had lost the thread somewhere and built a whole world out of it, and that the grit in the paint was probably just grit. Then she showed me the rules, and then a customer came in, and I did not drive back down to the valley. The rules are on a steel plate the size of a license plate, bolted to the front of the token machine where the light hits it. The letters are struck in deep and filled with a dark enamel, and the plate is older than the machine it is bolted to, older maybe than the building, because the corners weren't smooth, the way a door sill goes smooth under a lot of boots. There are 5 of them. I have gone over them so many times I could say them with my eyes shut, and some nights I do, the way other men say prayers. The first one says, "No violence, no hunting, and no feeding are permitted on the floor of the facility." Ada said the plainest way to understand it is that this is a place for taking stains out, not putting new ones in. Whatever a thing did to get its clothes into that state, it did somewhere else, and it leaves that somewhere else. Inside, nobody bleeds anybody. The second one is about the machines, and it is the one that keeps the peace, because it is the one that runs on quarters. A customer is under the protection of the house only for as long as they have a live cycle turning. Wash or dry, it does not matter, but the drum has to be moving and the timer has to be running. The second a dryer buzzes and the customer does not walk over and feed the slot to start it again, their protection is done that instant, and they are just a body standing in a room full of things that are hungry. Ada called them idle guests, the ones between cycles, and she said the word idle like it was a bruise. The third one is the yellow line. No customer crosses it ever toward the booth, and the attendant never crosses it going the other way, for anything, for anyone. She told me the second half mattered more than the first, because the line would stop them, but nothing would stop me except me. The fourth one says a customer washes their own loads. If they drop a sock, a basket, a coin, a key, they pick it up. The attendant does not touch a customer's clothes, wet or dry, does not reach for their dropped things, does not handle anything of theirs, because every single time one of them wants me over that line, this is the shape the trick will take. Something small, something reasonable, something on the floor. The fifth one I did not understand the weight of until later. It says the protection of the house ends where the asphalt ends, Where the cracked lot meets the gravel shoulder of the highway, the rules stop. Whatever is out there past that edge is allowed to be out there, and whatever it does to a customer who walks out to it is not the house's concern, and is not mine. Under the 5 rules, there is one more line, smaller, and it is not a rule so much as a fact. It says, the boiler decides. Ada saved that one for last, on purpose. At the end of the room, past the last dryer, there is a short utility hallway, and at the end of the hallway there is a steel door with 3 separate locks on it, and a heavy iron bar across the middle. Behind that door is the reason none of them ever breaks the first rule twice. It is a boiler. An old coal-fired steam boiler, the kind they put in mills and schoolhouses 100 years ago. Cast iron, riveted, big as a car stood on end. Ada's grandfather did not install it. It was in the ground when he bought the lot, she said, and the building got built around it, and it has not burned coal or held water in longer than anyone can say. It runs on something else now. She would not tell me what, and after 4 years I have my own idea, and I keep it to myself. Most of the night it sleeps, but it is wired into the whole place, somehow, into the copper that runs through the walls, and it knows the temperature of the room in a way that has nothing to do with heat. When a customer starts to slip, when the growling starts low in the chest, or the claws come out, or somebody leans in too hard toward that yellow line, the pipes in the walls begin to tick and then to hiss, a long, low sound like steam looking for a way out, and the steel door at the end of the hall shivers against its bar. That is the warning. Every single thing that comes through the door at Spin Dry knows that sound and knows what it means, and I have watched creatures that could tear the roof off go still and small and quiet the second they hear it. If a thing ignores the warning, if it goes ahead and does the thing on the floor that the first rule forbids, then the warning is over. Down the wall of dryers, the 13th one, the one I keep an out-of-order tag on so no living person ever loads it, the cast iron door of that machine swings open on its own, and something comes out of the vents behind it. I have only seen it once all the way my first night, and I have spent 4 years being careful so I never have to see it again. It is an arm, or it is built like an arm, long and jointed in too many places, and it is copper gone dark and green with age except right at the ends, where the fingers are, and the fingers are always bright, always glowing, a low furnace, orange like brass, just pulled off the forge, and they move slow and certain. It reaches out across the floor however far it has to reach, and it closes around whatever broke the rule, and it drags it back down the wall and folds it into the black square where the 13th dryer used to be, and the door shuts, and there is a sound after that I will not describe. Then the pipes go quiet, and the room is exactly as it was, and the timer on somebody's wash is still counting down like nothing happened. Ada told me the most important thing about the boiler last, with her hand on my arm, and it is what new attendants get killed for not understanding. The boiler is not on my side. It does not care who started it, and it does not care who was right. It does not protect people. It removes violence. The way a smoke alarm does not love anybody and does not hate anybody, it just goes off when there is smoke. When two things fight, it takes the one that made the first wound. Sometimes that is the one that deserved it, and sometimes it is the one that was only trying to live, and the boiler cannot tell the difference and would not care if it could. She pressed hardest on the last of it. The boiler is slow. It is certain, but it is slow. A thing on the far side of the glass could reach across that line and open my throat a full second before the copper arm ever got to it, and the copper arm taking that thing afterward would not put my blood back. The line was what kept me alive. Not the boiler, the line. The boiler only cleaned up after. She was still telling me this when the first customer came in. It was full dark by then. 2 of them came in together off the highway, out of the fog, and I understood in about 4 seconds that everything she had told me was true, because they were not people. One was tall and moving on joints that bent a little wrong, with eyes that had no white to them at all, wearing the shape of a woman like a coat that did not fit. The other was shorter and kept a ball cap pulled low, and where the cap sat there were 2 hard black points pushing up under the fabric. They were arguing before the doors even shut behind them, low and fast in a language full of clicks, over a machine or over nothing, the way tired travelers argue over nothing. Ada took my elbow and moved me back against the rear glass and told me, quiet, to keep my hands where they were and to look down at the counter when she said to look down. The one in the cap got louder. The woman with the black eyes said one short word, and the one in the cap reached out and took her by the throat. The room changed. Every machine in the place was darkened off, but the fluorescent hum overhead cut out anyway, all at once, like the building held its breath. In the wall behind me, the copper started to tick and then to hiss, and it was so much louder from the inside than I would have guessed, right up against my back. Down the hall, the steel door slammed once against its bar, hard, and dust came off the top of it. Ada said, "Look down." I did not look down fast enough. That is on me. I saw the out-of-order dryer, the 13th one, the cast-iron door of it drift open like a mouth, and I saw the first joint of the thing come out of the dark behind it, copper and green and wrong. And I saw the light of the fingers before I got my eyes to the counter. The whole room went orange for a second, low and moving, like a fire was walking. There was a sound of the thing crossing the floor that I felt my teeth more than heard, wet stone and old dust and something turning over that was huge. The one in the cap made a single short noise, not a scream, more like a question. And then the dryer door shut, and the hum came back on overhead, ordinary and green, and the woman with the black eyes let go of a breath, straightened the collar it had grabbed, nodded once at Ada, and carried her basket to a washer. At the far wall, like the last minute had not happened. There was a mark burned into the linoleum where the one in the cap had been standing. It is still there. I mop around it. I have mopped around that mark for 4 years, and it has never faded, and it never will, and I have come to think of it as the truest sign in the building, truer than the plate, because the plate tells me the rules, and the mark tells me what the rules are made of. Ada let me stand there and look at it as long as I needed. Then she gathered her keys and her coat, and before she left me alone with the room for the first time, she stopped at the door and told me the last thing she tells every new attendant, and it is what I have held on to over everything else she taught me. She said, "The boiler will keep the peace, and the line will keep me alive, and the rules will keep the guests honest, but not one of those three will do a thing for an attendant who decides, some slow night, that he knows better than all of them." The ones in the back of the book, she said, every last one, died a little while after they started to feel safe. Then she went out to her car and drove down the grade, and her taillights went around the bend, and the building was mine, and the fog came down, and I sat behind the glass in the humming light and waited to find out what she had hired me into. That was my first night, and I did not drive back down to the valley, and I have been coming up the grade to spin dry ever since. There was a room for me, which was half of why I took the job and most of why I stayed. Out back of the laundromat, sharing the one wall with the utility hall, there is a little cinder block apartment that used to be for the attendant back when the place ran 3 shifts and the highway was still the highway. 1 room and a bathroom and a hot plate and a window that looks up the grade at the trees. It is not much. It is warmer than a truck in a church lot, and the rent is nothing. And the mornings up there are so quiet after a night behind the glass that for the first month I could not sleep for how quiet they were. I would lie there with the sun coming up gray through the hemlock and listen to the building tick as it warmed, and I would tell myself I would give it 2 weeks, and then I would tell myself 2 more. The work itself, in the daylight and the early evening before the token machine locks, is just work. Ordinary people do still come up the grade, not many, but some. Hunters in the fall. A road crew in the summer that did their coveralls in a mess of loads and left the lint traps full of pine pitch. An old man from Toll Creek who did not trust his own machine and liked to sit and talk while his shirts went around. Church women with a van full of donation clothes. They come in the light, they leave before dark, and not one of them has ever known that the place they wash their socks becomes another thing entirely when the sun goes behind the ridge. I liked those hours. I still do. There is a plain good feeling in making change for a man who just wants his laundry done, and I hold on to it, because the plain good feeling is thin cover against the rest of it, and thin cover is better than none. Ada taught me the register in those first weeks, the real one, the ledger she keeps in a locked drawer in the back that is not for any customer's eyes. It goes back 3 generations in 3 different hands, her grandfather's and her father's and hers, and it is not a list of names, mostly because most of them do not have names that can be written down. It is a list of arrivals, what comes, when it comes, what it pays, what it needs, and what it did the one time somebody got it wrong. There are pages I was not ready for. There are entries in her father's hand that just say a date and the word gone and a name after it, and the names are men's names, attendants, the ones before me who crossed the line or walked into the lot or fell asleep at the wrong hour. Ada did not hide those pages from me. She turned to them on purpose the first week and made me read them, and then she closed the book and looked at me and said that the ones who lived were the ones who believed the register before they had a reason to. She wanted me scared early. She said scared early is what old attendants have in common. The other kind do not get to be old. So I learned the regulars one at a time by rote, which nights the moon does what, because there are a few who come only when it is full, and they are not bad if I leave them be and do not look too long, big and quiet and ashamed of themselves, running their torn flannel through the wash and gone before the moon sets. Which one is the gray woman who folds and never seems to have anything to fold, and closes a second set of eyelids when she is thinking? Which cold snaps bring the diggers up? Which storms bring the dogs? I learned that the vampires proper, the real ones, the ones that look almost like people, hate the dogs for reasons that are their own, and hate the diggers for the smell, and that a full night at Spin Dry can hold a dozen things that would kill each other on sight anywhere else in the world, all of them washing their clothes 6 feet apart under the same buzzing lights, because the same rules hold every one of them, and the same door waits at the end of the same hall. It is the only peace some of them ever get. I came to understand that about the place slowly, and it is what keeps me from hating the work even now. For a few hours a night, in a cinder block box in the middle of nowhere, the things that hunt each other get to just be tired and put their heads down and be left alone. What I did not understand in those first weeks, what took years, and what nearly cost me more than once, is how fast all of it stops being strange. The mind does a thing to survive that is not always kind to the body it is keeping alive. It files the impossible under ordinary so it can rest. And a night clerk who has stopped being afraid is a night clerk with his hand halfway over the line. The first one that ever worked me alone was The Boy in the Rain, and I came closer to dying that night than I did for a long time after, because I did not yet know that the small ones are the worst. It was maybe my second week. Ada had stopped coming up to sit the shift with me, and I was on my own from midnight to sunrise, 4 nights on, and it had been raining since the afternoon, the steady mountain kind that does not so much fall as hang, turning the lot to a black sheet and swallowing the trees across the road, so that past the reach of the bug light there was nothing at all, just gray going to nothing. I had run the mop once around the front where people track in, tagged out a washer that was leaving grit in the fabric softener cup, and settled onto the stool with the little space heater going against my bad knee. It was a little after 2 in the morning when I looked up from the monitor, and there was a child standing outside the front glass. He looked 7, maybe 8. He was soaked through, his dark hair pasted flat to his forehead, and he was dressed in a way that made the back of my neck go cold before my head caught up to why. It was a uniform. A little Boy Scout uniform, but old, the wrong old. A heavy tan shirt with a neckerchief and a slide, short trousers buttoned at the knee, the kind of thing that turns up in a photograph from before anybody now alive was born, 1930s, I would guess, though I am no expert. He had no coat, he had no shoes. In one hand down at his side, he was holding a wadded cloth, a bandana, and even through the glass and the rain I could see it was not wet the way the rest of him was wet. It was dark. It was soaked through with something that was not water. He came to the doors, and they slid open for him, and he stepped just inside onto the mat and stopped there. He did not shake off. He did not wipe his feet. He looked at me across the whole length of that bright room, up in my glass box, and he smiled, and he said he was cold. I said he could not be in here alone, that he needed to go find his mom or dad. My voice did not sound as steady as I wanted. He came a little farther in, walking soft, and I watched the floor behind him. He was pouring wet. Water should have been running off him in a line. and the linoleum behind him stayed dry, not damp, dry, shining, the way I had left it. His bare feet came down on it and lifted off it and left nothing, not a print, not a smear, and the rain that ran down his little tan shirt got to the hem and just stopped, like it hit the edge of him and gave up. He held up a plastic cup. It was the kind they hand out at a gas station fountain, cloudy, cracked, and it had coins in it, quarters, and some other things that were not quarters. He said his hands were too cold to work the machine. He said the metal hurt to touch. He asked if I would come and put his money in for him and start it, just the one, just washer 4, because his things were so dirty and his mother would be angry. Washer 4 was the closest machine to the booth. It was maybe 8 feet from the yellow line. I told him I could not leave the booth. I told him if he set the cup on the counter I could not touch it either, but that the machines were easy, that he could work the slot himself, that a boy his age could count out 4 quarters. I heard myself explaining the coin slot to a drowned child at 2 a.m, and some far back part of me was screaming. He did not go to the machine. He came closer to the booth instead, right to the edge of the yellow line, and he looked down at it, at the paint, at the gray grit shining in it, and his smile did a small thing at the corners. He looked up at me and asked why the floor was yellow there. I did not answer. He asked if it was to keep him out or to keep me in. And that was not a child's question, and it was not a child's voice underneath it anymore, though it was still wearing the child's voice on top, the way the tall thing on my first night had worn a woman. I did not stay calm, but I stayed inside the line, which is the only calm that counts. He tried everything a scared little boy would try. He said his mother was hurt out by the road, that she had fallen, that she needed help right now. From the booth, I can see the whole front lot and the mouth of the highway, and there was nobody out there, nothing but rain on black asphalt. He said the coins were falling out of the cup, that they were rolling toward me. Would I please just catch them? He set the cup down and tipped it, slow, and the quarters ran out across the floor, and some of them rolled right up to the line and one crossed it. One silver quarter came to rest an inch inside the yellow, spinning down to flat, and he looked at it and then at me with his head tipped over, and he said, "You dropped one." I did not reach for it. I have never reached for it. When begging did not work, the rest of him came up through the cracks. His eyes had looked dark and ordinary from across the room, but this close, up against the light, they were not. The black in the middle of them had opened up to swallow the color, all the way, wide as a cat's in a dark room. And over the black there was a film, a cloudy, segmented shine that slid when he blinked. More than one lid, like a bug has, sideways. His breath fogged the glass when he leaned in, and it should not have, because there was no warmth in him to fog anything, and the fog it left was greasy and smelled like the underside of a dock at low tide. He asked me one more time, and this time the child's voice slipped all the way off. What came out under it was dry, a rattle with words writing on it. No wetness in it anywhere, despite all that rain. A sound like a paper wasp nest, if a paper wasp nest could talk. He said he had been thirsty for a very long time, and he put his hand out toward me, over the counter, over the line. The fingers crossed the yellow. There was a sound like a finger snap made of glass, and a spark, a small hard flash of blue-white right at the paint, and the boy snatched his hand back and cradled it against his chest and hissed, a long, furious sound. And for just that second the shape of him swam, the little uniform and the soft face going thin and gray and stretched around something that had never been a boy at all. The pipes in the wall behind me were ticking. I had not even heard them start. Then headlights. A rig came down off the pass with its brakes stuttering, big and slow, and it swung into the lot with its air horn giving a short courtesy blast at nothing, some trucker glad to see a lit building, and its lights raked across the front glass and lit the boy up from behind, and the boy was already turning away. Whatever was going to happen with the pipes and the 13th dryer, he did not wait for it. He walked back out through the doors, soft and dry-footed, out into the rain, and the last I saw of him, he was standing under the broken half of the neon sign in the downpour, small and pale and looking back at me, and then the trucker came through the doors, stamping his boots and swearing about the grade, ordinary as bread, and when he had gone through and I looked again, the boy was not there. The trucker did 2 loads and drank a coffee and told me about his ex-wife and never knew a thing. I let him talk. I have never in my life been so glad to hear a man complain. The shaking did not start until the trucker was gone. Fear in that building waits its turn. It holds off politely for as long as I need my hand steady and my voice level, and it only comes for me after, when the lot is empty and the danger has driven off east toward Toll Creek. The trucker pulled out around 4 with a wave and a honk, glad for the company and the coffee, and the second his taillights went around the bend, the whole of it came up through me at once, and my legs would not hold, and I sat down hard on the stool and shook like a wet dog for the better part of 10 minutes. I could not have made change in that state. If a customer, any customer, ordinary or otherwise, had walked in right then, I do not know what I would have done, and that scared me worse than the boy had. When it passed, I made myself get up and look at the floor where he had been. There was no water. Of course there was no water. But there was the quarter, the one he had tipped out of the cup, sitting an inch inside the yellow line, catching the light. I stood in the booth and looked at it for a long time. I did not have the long-handled pan yet. Ada gave me that later, when I told her about the coins, and she nodded like she had been waiting for me to ask. That first morning I did not have anything, so when the sun finally came up gray over the ridge and turned the lot from black to the color of an old nickel, I went and found a broom in the supply closet, and I stood as far back from the line as the handle would let me, and I swept that single quarter out under the gate and across the floor to the far wall, and I never once let my hand come near the paint. Then I picked it up off the far wall where it was safe, where it had been out past the line and back, and I did not know yet why that made it safe, but I knew that it did. And I put it in an empty coffee can from the trash, and it rang against the tin, one small sound in the quiet, and that was the first coin in the can. There are 42 in it now, and it gets heavier every season, and I have never spent a single one, and I never will. Every coin in that can is a night somebody stood on the far side of my line and wanted me to reach, and every coin in that can is a night I did not. I keep it under the counter where I can see it. On the bad nights, the slow ones, the ones where the wearing down gets its fingers in and my own hand starts to feel like it belongs to somebody reasonable and kind, I take the can out and I give it a shake, and I listen to all those nights ring against the tin, and it helps. It is the closest thing to a prayer I have found that works. I did not sleep that first morning. I went up to the little room out back and I lay on the cot and listened to the building tick, and I saw the light come up full through the window, and I thought about a barefoot boy in a uniform from before my grandfather was born, standing out in a rain that fell on him and nothing else, waiting with the patience of the drowned for one tired man to feel sorry enough to open a door. I thought I would leave. I did not. But that was the morning I understood, all the way down, that I was going to have to become a certain kind of careful and stay that way, and that the day I stopped would not come with a warning, because the whole trick of it is that it comes dressed as a good night. Ada came up the next morning with the sun, and I told her, and she nodded like I had described the weather. She said he had been coming since she was a girl. She said he never touched a customer who had a cycle running, and he never crossed the line, though he tried the line every time, and the paint always turned him back. What he hunted, she said, was people who would walk out to him. He could not take a thing that stayed behind the paint or stayed inside a life cycle, so he worked on the wanting. He looked for the person who would step over or step outside on their own 2 feet, because the oldest law under all the other laws is that a thing like him can only take what comes to it willing. She told me his rain never touches the floor because it is not this rain, it is the rain from wherever he drowned, still falling on him, and he carries it. She said not to hate him. Then she said, in the same breath, never to help him, not once, not ever, no matter how cold his hands look, and that if I ever caught myself feeling my body start to lean toward that line for him, I was to sit down on the stool and put both hands under my legs until it passed. He still comes 2 or 3 times a year, always in a hard rain, always barefoot, always with that dark bandana in his fist. I do not talk to him through the glass anymore. It does not keep him away. He stands out under the dead half of the sign and he waits, patient as weather, watching my door, until some tired, ordinary soul pulls in to wash their sheets, and then I have to watch him work on them instead, and hope they are the kind who stay inside until their clothes are dry. The worst customers were almost never the ones that looked the worst. I learned that from the dogs. The first time the dogs came in was a night of dry lightning, the kind that walks along the ridgeline without any rain to it. So the whole sky over the pass kept going white and then black, white and then black. And the thunder came, late and long after. The door slid open around 1 a.m, and 5 dogs came in out of the flicker. They were big, bigger than they had any right to be, tall at the shoulder as a good-sized calf, and they were all the same, deep rust red, short-coated, with a ridge of hair running the wrong way down the spine. Rhodesians, I think, or something that started as Rhodesians a long time ago. They came in single file, calm, dripping nothing, and the one in front was carrying something in its mouth. It walked right up to the base of the booth, stopped at the yellow line without me having to say one word to it, sat down and lifted its head and set what it was carrying up onto the sliding tray. It was a pouch, old cracked leather, drawn shut with a rawhide cord and heavy. I did not know what I was supposed to do, so I did what Ada had told me to do whenever I did not know, which was call her. I picked up the landline and I said, "Ada, there are 5 dogs in here and the big one just paid me." She did not laugh. She asked me how many and what kind and whether the leader had brought its own coin. When I told her, she said give them the big triple loader, washer 12, and leave 4 clean towels folded on the folding table and then leave them alone and hang up, and she hung up. I opened the pouch with the little wooden ruler I keep for reaching things I am not allowed to touch and tipped it into the tray, silver. Old silver, dark with handling, coins with faces on them worn down to ghosts, and there was enough in there to run every machine in the building for a week. I counted out what a triple load and a long dry cost, and I left the rest in the tray and slid it back, and the leader took the pouch in its mouth again, and the 5 of them went to washer 12. They had brought their own laundry. It took me a while to let myself look straight at that. They had dragged it in behind them, and I had been so fixed on the leader and the pouch that I had not looked at the others, and now I saw it, a rug. A big sheepskin thing, matted, dark, and soaked through and stiff in patches, dark, dried the color of old rust, and it did not smell like a wet dog, it smelled like a slaughter yard in July. That was their bed, I learned later. Their one soft place in the world, and every so often it needed washing, and there was only one machine in the state that would take it and one place that would not ask about the stains. They pushed it into the big drum with their paws and their noses, working together, patient, and one of them stood up on its hind legs and pushed the door shut, and another put its nose to the coin slot. And I ran the cycle from the booth, because that much at least I am allowed to do. Hot water, heavy soil. They sat in a half circle in front of the glass door of the washer and watched it turn like other people watch a fire. I looked for them in the dryer doors along the wall, the round chrome ones. Once I noticed, I could not stop noticing it. 5 big dogs sitting in a bright room, and the polished steel gave me the room, the machines, the folding table, the towels, and no dogs. Where the dogs were, there was just floor. They are, I will say it plain, among the easiest customers I have. They behave like good dogs almost all the time. They wait their turn. They do not make a mess I have to clean. Once, one of the younger ones brought a stick in from the lot and dropped it just outside the line and looked up at me, hopeful, ears up and waiting, and I wanted to throw it so badly my arm ached. And I did not, because the stick would land out past the line and one of us would have to fetch it, and it was not going to be them. They caught on that I would not, and they never asked again, but sometimes the young one still brings the stick and lays it down out there, just to show me it remembered. What they are only shows after midnight, and only if I know to look. No reflection. Eyes that catch the light and throw it back red when there is no red light to catch. Teeth a little too long for the mouths, so the mouth's never quite close all the way. And when they get happy, when the leader comes back with the pouch or when the rug comes out clean and warm, their feet come up off the floor. Not far. An inch, maybe 2. The whole pack drifting a hand's width above the linoleum with their tails going, and the first time I saw it, I sat dead still on my stool and did not breathe until they settled. Out past the asphalt, they are something else. I do not go look, but I have seen the deer some mornings, off in the tree line where the lot meets the woods, pale and empty and light as a paper bag when the wind moves them, with tracks leading back toward the building that stop well short of it. I do not know how a pack of hunting dogs came to be what they are. Ada does not either. They were coming in when her father ran the place, and the register in the back that goes back to the 80s has them in it, same 5, and dogs do not live 40 years, and these have not aged a day. I only ever saw the plate come off them once, and it was a man that took it off, a man named Gary. Gary drove a jacked-up pickup with a gun rack in the back window and a bumper sticker about cold dead hands, and he came in one night already loaded, boots muddy, hauling a sleeping bag that smelled like he had shot an animal and slept next to it. He had been out jacklighting deer up a forest road, is my guess. The kind of hunting that happens at night for reasons that are not about the meat, and his rig had overheated or he had just gotten turned around in the fog, and he saw the one lit building on the grade and came in to dry his bag and sober up. The dogs were in their half circle at washer 12. Their rug was going around. And Gary took one look at 5 big red dogs lying on the floor of a laundromat at 2 in the morning and got mean about it. The fast, ugly mean that comes up out of some men when they have been drinking and the world is not arranged for their comfort. He wanted them gone. He asked me what kind of a place let animals lay all over the floor. He kicked a folding chair over. One of the younger dogs got up, not hackled, just curious, and walked toward him a few loose steps, and Gary drew his boot back and kicked it in the ribs, hard, and the sound of it went through the whole quiet room. The dog did not yelp. A real dog yelps. This one just moved with the kick, rolled off it easy, and came back to its feet, and the other 4 stood up all at once, without a sound, and their tails stopped. And I watched the light in their eyes come up slow from an ordinary brown to a deep banked red, all 10 of them at the same time, like coals when a breath moves over them. In the wall, the copper began to tick. Gary heard it. Some animal part of him heard it even drunk, because he stopped with his belt, already half out of the loops. The belt he had pulled, meaning to snap the buckle at them, and he looked around the bright room like he could not place the sound. Over at the far wall, a woman I had not even registered as a customer, a gray, quiet woman folding gray, quiet clothes, closed a second set of eyelids and turned her face away. The pipes hissed. The steel door down the hall knocked once against its bar, and the dogs sat down, all 5, at once, and put their long teeth away behind their lips, because they knew the sound too, and they knew that if they took Gary here on the floor, the thing in the wall would not care that he started it. It would only see the wound. I told Gary, and my voice shook, that those were paying customers, and he needed to get in his truck and leave before he did the one thing that got a man taken here. I think it was the word taken that reached him, or the way I said it, because he heard enough in it to believe me even 3 sheets to the wind. He backed off, cussing, buckled his belt, grabbed his stinking bag, and went out to his truck, and that should have been where it ended. He did not leave. He backed the truck to the edge of the lot, right to the lip where the asphalt breaks up into the gravel of the shoulder, and he stopped there, just inside the last of the pavement. And he settled in to wait them out. He had a cooler in the cab. He started in on it and started throwing the empties, and the bottles came sailing across the lot to burst against the front glass, one and then another, and he was yelling the whole time, telling the dogs to come out, telling them what he would do. He had it worked out in his drunk head that whatever had rattled the pipes could not reach him out there past the door, and about that one thing he was exactly right. The building could not touch him in the lot. What he had never taken in, because he never looked at the plate, was the 5th rule. The lot could not protect him either. The dogs finished their dry cycle. I remember the buzzer going off, ordinary, and the timer stopping, and their protection ending with it, and they did not care, because nothing in the building was going to move on 5 of them. They opened the dryer. They took their rug out warm, and the 2 biggest took it in their teeth, 1 corner each, and they folded it, walking it toward each other and laying it over and doing it again, neat as a woman folding a sheet, until it was a clean square, and one of them carried it. Then all 5 walked to the front, out the sliding doors, across the wet black lot, past the broken glass, and they did not go to Gary's truck. They went to the edge, to the line where the asphalt ended, and they stood there in a row with their backs to him at the lip of the pavement, and they waited. And Gary, because he was a fool, and because he was drunk, and because some men cannot stand to be turned away from even by dogs, opened his door and stepped down out of the cab onto the gravel to have the last word. He was maybe 2 steps onto the shoulder, off the asphalt, off the property, out from under every rule that had kept him breathing, still yelling when they took him. I have gone over what I saw 100 times, and it is always the same, and it is always too fast. They came off the ground, all 5, up and over the gravel line in one motion with no run to it, and they hit him high at the shoulders and the arms and the back of the coat, and they did not tear at him. They lifted him. He went up off his feet, with his arms wheeling and his yell going thin, up above the truck, up above the tree line, into the low black clouds that had been walking the ridge all night with their dry lightning, and the white flashed once up in there. And I saw them for half a second, 5 dogs and a man, small and black against the lit cloud, and then the dark came back, and the thunder came late and long the way it had all night, and they were gone. They came back 3 nights later. The leader came into the booth alone and set something on the tray, and it was a boot. One muddy boot, Gary's, the mud on it dried gray. It set the boot down, and it sat, and it looked up at me, with its plain brown eyes, waiting the way a dog waits to be told it is good. I did not tell it anything. I left the boot in the tray until dawn, and then I put it in a box in the back, and the box has some other things in it that I do not look at, and I never asked them anything about Gary because even if they could have answered, I did not want to hear it. They still come in on lightning nights and wash their rug. The young one still brings me a stick and lays it outside the line and looks up hopeful, and I still do not throw it. I like them, I mean that. But I have never once let liking them turn into forgetting them, because out past the asphalt they are 5 things that do not age and do not reflect and can carry a grown man up into a cloud. And the only reason they have never been anything but gentle with me is that they have decided, so far, to be. Polite is a thing a monster can choose. It is not a thing a monster stops being able to take back. If the dogs taught me that a friendly thing is still a thing, the Greywoods taught me the other half of it, which is that a thing can be decent all the way down and still not be safe, because being safe is not always up to it. They come every summer, always in July, always in the same station wagon, a big brown thing with wood paneling gone gray and soft, riding low on its springs with a car-top carrier strapped over the roof. There are 4 of them. A father, a mother, a son who looks about 16, and a daughter who looks about 9, and they have looked exactly those ages for as long as Ada's family has kept the register, which means the boy has been 16 since before I was born. Their skin is the color of a mushroom, that soft dead gray-white, and they carry a smell in with them that took me a while to name. Wet peat, first, the deep black mud at the bottom of a bog, and under it faint copper, like a handful of pennies held too long in a hot fist. The father is missing an ear, clean off, an old wound long past bleeding, and he does not talk much. The mother does the talking. Her name is Ruth, and she is, I mean this, one of the kindest customers I have. The boy is Owen, and he wears a big pair of headphones over his ears the whole time, the padded kind, and they are not plugged into anything. They never have been. And I have stopped wondering what he is keeping out or keeping in. The girl is June, and she carries a rag doll with the stuffing coming out of one arm, and she likes to stand right up close to the yellow line and look at it, and then look at me, testing the way a kid tests a fence. They act like any family on a road trip. They gripe about the drive. Ruth reads the flyers for the caverns and the drive-through animal park that they can never go see because those places are open in the daytime. The kids fight over who gets to sit on the folding table. Every year Ruth has me take their picture on a little disposable camera all 4 of them lined up under the dead half of the neon, and every year she thanks me like it is the first time. And every year, at least once, one of them starts to slip, and Ruth's whole face changes, and she starts to apologize before it has even happened, because they are dead, and the dead do not keep. Something in them weeps out through the skin, a grease, and it gets into their clothes, and if the clothes are not stripped down hot and bleached hard on a regular schedule, the rot in the cloth speaks to the rot in them, and the hunger that they hold down all year comes up. The bleach is not about looking nice. The bleach is what keeps Ruth talking sweet to me instead of coming over the counter. They drive a long way to get it done right, because a home machine cannot run hot enough, and a laundromat down in a town has too many cameras and too many questions. And Spin Dry has one dryer with an out-of-order tag, and an attendant who has seen worse, and an owner who takes their money and does not flinch. They bring a cooler, always, packed with raw meat on ice, and they eat from it in the wagon between loads to keep the edge off, and as long as the cooler is full and the bleach is running, they are just a tired family doing their wash. The summer it nearly went wrong. They had left the cooler behind. They did not know it until they were already up the grade and unpacking the wagon, and by then it was a 2-hour drive back down to where they had stopped, and Ruth came to the booth with her hands working at each other and told me, quiet, that they had a problem, and asked if there was anything in the building they could use to hold on until morning. I keep a little fridge in the booth, but there is nothing in it a dead thing wants. I told her I did not have anything, and I could see them all going slower and sharper at the same time, which I had learned to watch for. When they are fed, they are loose and easy. When they are hungry, they get still and sharp, and their eyes track the warm things in the room. The father had stopped even pretending to load the machine. Owen had turned his headphoned head toward the front doors and was breathing through his mouth. June had her nose almost against the yellow line, taking me in, and that was when the college kids pulled in. 2 of them, a boy and a girl, mud to the knees, a truck bed full of wet camping gear because the weather had run them off the mountain, and they came in loud and laughing and shivering and hauling a duffel of soaked sleeping bags and clothes. The girl had a gash on her shin, an old scrape from the trail reopened, and there was blood on her sock, not much, a little, gone brown at the edges and fresh red in the middle, and every dead face in that room turned toward her at the same time, slow, like flowers following a light. The father's ruined face worked. Owen took his headphones half off, and Owen took a step. One slow step toward the girl, and his weight came forward onto the ball of his foot, and I saw his jaw drop open just a little, and in that second I did not think I could stop it. In the wall, the pipes hissed, and this time they wept, black soot sifting down out of the vent above the folding table in a fine dark rain, which is the last warning, the one that comes right before the door. The steel door down the hall was rattling steady. Ruth had thrown herself between her son and the girl with her arms out, hissing at him in that clicking underlanguage, but he was past hearing her, the way a starving man is past manners. I did the only thing I had. I have thought since that it was the smartest thing I ever did in that building, and it took me about 1 second to think of it. I leaned into the grill, and I called out to the college kids, loud, easy, cheerful, that the machines were on the house tonight. First come, first served. Storm special. Throw your stuff in, and I will start it for you. No charge. The boy called out a thanks. I ran to the booth controls, and I fed a cycle to the nearest washer they loaded, and the drum caught and turned, and the timer started to count, and the second it did, those 2 kids were customers under a live cycle, and the second rule closed over them like a lid, and the room felt it. Owen stopped with his foot still off the floor, not because he had gotten his manners back, because the thing in the wall would take him now, first wound, no matter how it started, and the couple were no longer just meat, they were guests, and the whole calculation changed. He rocked back onto his heel, his jaw closed, but the hunger was still there, and it was still in all of them, and a stop step is not a fed family, so I did the other thing. In the supply cabinet inside the booth, I keep the industrial bleach powder, the big waxed boxes of it, the kind that comes on a pallet, and I slid the tray out, and I put 1 box in it and pushed it through to Ruth, and then another, and then a third, 3 big boxes of it stacked in the tray, and I told her to open them. She understood before I finished. She tore the first one open, right there, and the sharp of it hit the whole room. That hard, clean chemical bite that gets up under everything else. And she pressed her face into it and breathed it. And she carried the open boxes to her family. And one by one, they put their faces down into the bleach and breathed the father, and then June, and then last, Owen. And it did for them what the smell of coffee does for a drunk in the morning. It cut the other smell, the warm blood smell, right out of the air for them and gave them something to hold on to. Their eyes came back down. The tracking stopped. They started, slow and then steady, to do their wash. The college kids never knew a thing. They dried their bags, complained about the mountain, flirted with each other, and left a little after 4 with their free, clean laundry, calling out a thank you. And the girl with the scrape waved at little June on her way out, and June waved back with her doll, all her teeth showing gray in a smile. And the boy said a thing to the girl about the cute, weird family at the laundromat, and they drove off down the grade and never came back, and that is the best thing that could have happened to them. Ruth cried a little after. She apologized until I told her to stop. She left the silver dollar in the tray on top of the wash money, which is what she leaves when she feels she owes me. And the next July they were back, cooler full, and the father had a new problem, which was that one of his fingers had come off in a dryer, and he asked me for a needle and thread from the little sewing kit I keep. And he sat on the folding table in the fluorescent light and sewed his own finger back on with black thread while June held the light for him. And it points the wrong way now, but it works. They are good people. I have decided to just call them that. Good people with a hunger they did not ask for and cannot ever put down. And the reason they get to stay good, the only reason, is a hot dryer and a box of bleach and a set of rules that gives them somewhere to be dead for a few hours without having to be monsters about it. Take that away, and they are exactly what the college kids should have run from. The rules do not make them good. They were already good. The rules just make it possible for good to be enough. Most of the nights are not stories. Nobody would guess that from the outside, and the boredom of it has come closer to killing me than any monster ever has. Most of the nights I sit behind the glass, with the space heater on my knee and a paperback going soft at the spine, and the machines run, and the guests come and go, and nothing happens. A shifter washes his flannel on a full moon and nods to me on his way out. The gray woman folds. A pair of the almost human ones share a bench and do not speak and leave separate. Rain on the roof. The token machine ticks over to lock at midnight. I make it to sunrise, and I go up to my room, and I sleep, and I come back, and I do it again, hundreds of nights, then 1,000, then more than that. And every one of those quiet nights takes a little of the fear off me, and the fear is the only tool I have. I found that out with a woman in a ring. She was a guest, one of the almost human kind, older, well-dressed, the sort that could stand in a bank in the daylight and never draw an eye. And she had been coming maybe a year, quiet, no trouble, and I had gotten used to her the way I get used to anybody who keeps coming in, used to her. Those are the 2 most dangerous words in the building. One night she was folding at the table nearest the booth, and a ring came off her finger, a real one, old and heavy and gold, and it hit the floor and rolled right up to the yellow line and stopped an inch inside it, on my side, glinting, and I reached for it. There was no hum that night, no trick, no voice working on me. She did not even ask. She just made a small sound, oh, and bent to look for it, and I saw it there on my side of the paint, and my body just answered it, bend and reach and hand it back, and I was down over the counter with my arm out, and my fingers were maybe a hand's width from the paint before the cold came up through me and stopped me. Not thought, not memory, just the animal in me smelling something the front of my mind had gone to sleep on. I looked up. She was not bent over looking for the ring anymore. She was standing bolt upright, and she was watching my hand, and her face had the pleasant open patience of a person who has been waiting a long time and has learned to wait a little longer. And I understood that she had been coming quiet and clean for a year for exactly this, for the night I would be used to her, and that the ring had not fallen, it had been placed. She had rolled it to a stop 1 inch inside my line, and then made the small human sound that pulls a hand out before the mind can vote, and she had come within a hand's width of never having to try anything harder than that. I sat back on the stool. I put both hands flat under my legs, the way I do for the boy, and I stayed that way until she gave it up. She did not hiss. She did not change. She just looked at me a while longer, and then she bent herself on her side of the line and picked up her own ring with her own hand and put it back on and finished her folding and left. And she nodded to me on the way out, exactly the way she always had. And she still comes. And she has never tried the ring again because she does not need to try it again. She only needs me to forget one time. She has all the nights I have, and she is betting on the arithmetic of them. And so is every other thing that comes through those doors. Ada could not teach me that, and the ledger could not teach me it either. Only the ring did. They are right to bet on the arithmetic, and knowing it does not make me one bit safer. I could not stay afraid for 4 years. It is not built into anybody. The fear wears down to habit, and the habit wears down to comfort, and comfort is a hand reaching over a line for a stranger's ring at 3 a.m. So I made myself a rule under the rules, a private one. Anything that comes to rest inside the line stays where it is until the sun is up. A coin, a ring, a sock, a key, a button, a tooth. It does not matter what it is, or who it belongs to, or how harmless it looks, or how kind the face on the other side of the glass is. It waits for the daylight, and then I get the long-handled pan and I sweep it out under the gate without my hand ever going past the paint, and it goes in the can. The can is mostly quarters, but there is a gold ring in there too, down at the bottom, and I know whose it is. And every dawn I sweep the night's little offerings in on top of it, and I think about how close a warm room and a slow year and a nice old woman came to doing what the boy in the rain never could. Winter is the hardest season for that kind of wearing down, because winter is long and the nights are longer and the quiet stacks up deep. And it was in the deepest part of a winter that the mountain came up to the lot. The things that live under the mountain come up in the dead of winter, when the shafts freeze and there is no warm left down in the dark. And the winter I want to tell about was the winter Travis Dunn learned what the 5th rule was for. Ada calls them the clay diggers, because we do not know what they call themselves, and nobody has ever thought it smart to ask. There are old copper mines all through this range, played out a century ago and left to cave in slow, and there are older holes than that, holes nobody dug, and the clay diggers live down in them. They are small, smaller than a man, thin, and under the big canvas coats they wear, buttoned wrong and hanging off them like the coats came off a bigger creature. They are covered in a fine gray-green scale. Their hands are the wrong shape, the fingers gone flat and wide and hard at the tips from a lifetime of digging. Their eyes are big and black, and they have a second lid, clear, that slides across sideways when the fluorescent light gets to be too much, which is always, so they are forever half-veiling and unveiling those eyes at me across the room. And they smell of clay, red clay and sulfur, a hot spring rotten egg smell that gets into the machines for a week after they leave. They come to wash a poison off their clothes. Down where they dig there is an acid clay, sour and yellow, that cakes onto the canvas, and if it dries all the way, it starts in on the scale underneath, so they have to strip it out hot before that happens. And only a real machine will do it. They are good customers. Quiet, clean, they keep to themselves. They run several loads at once and turn every dryer to its hottest setting and sit in the wall of heat with their eyes half-veiled, content, and they pay in gold. Not coins, not always. Raw gold, nuggets and dust in little leather pouches, dug out of the deep parts of the mountain where the water has been working it loose for longer than there have been men to want it. And Ada has a man down in the valley who turns it into money and has learned not to ask her where it comes from. Nobody else likes them. The dead think they smell. The dogs will not float near them, and the clay diggers give it right back, hissing low at anything that gets close, veiling and unveiling those big eyes. But it never goes past that, because every last thing in that building knows what is behind the steel door, and nobody starts anything on the floor. Travis Dunn was not a monster. That was the trouble with Travis. He was just a man, a local, one of the ones the past chews up, thin and jumpy and burning through himself the way the ones on the pipe do. And he had come in around midnight to wash the one bag of clothes he owned, and to be somewhere warm and lit for a while. I knew him a little the way everybody up here knows everybody a little. He had done some time. He had stolen from about everyone who ever tried to help him, and he had that hollow lightness to him, that way of never quite landing his eyes on anything that comes on somebody who has traded most of what he is for the next thing. I did not turn him away. Ada does not turn anybody away who comes in to do their wash. So Travis was in there in the far corner waiting on his dryer when 3 of the clay diggers came in out of the snow with their loads and their gold. He watched them the whole time. I saw him watching, and I did not like it, but watching is allowed. The smallest of the 3 came to the booth and set a pouch on the tray, and it was heavy, and it clinked soft and dull, the way gold does, not bright like silver. And I took out what the loads cost and slid the rest back, and the little digger took the pouch and set it down on a folding table by their machines while it dug in its coat for something and turned away for just a second. And in that second, Travis crossed the room quick and quiet and put his hand on the pouch and put the pouch in his jacket and sat back down in the corner like he had never moved. I saw the whole thing from the booth. I could not do one thing about it. I am not allowed over the line, and I am not allowed to touch a customer's property. And the theft happened out on the floor, past the paint, in the country, where I am no help to anybody. I got on the grill and I told Travis, low, to put it back, that he did not understand what he had just done, that these were not people he could steal from and skip town on. He looked up at me with those hollow eyes and gave me a little grin and said he did not know what I was talking about. And then he said the thing that told me he was already dead and just did not know it yet. He said, that thing in the wall keeps them from touching me anyway, right? I heard about that, so what do I care? He had heard about the boiler. He had not heard about the 5th rule. The clay diggers noticed the pouch was gone about a minute later. There was no shouting. I sat in the booth and felt the cold crawl up the back of my neck anyway, because the quiet of them was worse than shouting would have been. The little one turned back to the folding table and went still, and the other 2 went still, and the 3 of them stood there veiling and unveiling those black eyes, and then they clicked at each other, soft and quick, and one of them went to the front doors and out into the snow, just walked out. And the other 2 settled down to wait by their machines like nothing at all had happened, and Travis, in his corner, started to sweat. It took less than an hour. They came up out of the tree line where the lot meets the woods, out of the dark and the falling snow, in 1s and 2s, and then in a crowd, more of them than I would have guessed the whole mountain held. Small coated shapes with big black eyes catching the light of the lot lamp and throwing it back a dull yellow. Some wore the canvas coats, and some wore next to nothing, just mud and scraps straight up out of the ground. They did not come to the doors. They went to Travis's car. It was an old sedan parked out at the edge of the asphalt, and they surrounded it, and then they got up on it, sat on the hood, on the roof, on the trunk, a dozen, and then 20, and then more, perched all over that car, in the snow, like crows, on a dead thing, and they turned their faces to the windshield, to the empty driver's seat, and they waited. They did not touch the building. They did not cross onto the porch. They knew exactly where the property's protection was, and they set themselves down just past the edge of it, all around the one car, and they went as still as the cold. Travis went to the front doors to run for it, and got about 1 step onto the porch before he understood. Out past the asphalt, past the gravel line, 20 pairs of yellow eyes turned to him at once. He backed up into the building so fast he fell down. He was ours, technically. He was a customer. He had a dryer going, and the second rule held over him as long as it turned. But the second rule is made of quarters, and a dryer runs about 45 minutes, and when it stops, the guest is idle, and idle is fair game even inside the walls. So Travis figured out the only thing he could do, and he did it for 4 days. He fed the dryer. Every time the buzzer went, he was up out of the plastic chair with a quarter, feeding the slot, starting it again, an empty drum turning with nothing in it but the one bag of clothes gone gray and thin from 100 cycles. Because as long as that drum turned, he was a protected guest, and the boiler in the wall would take anything that moved on him, and the clay diggers knew it, and stayed out on the car and waited. They are patient in a way a person cannot hold in the head. They live in the dark, in the cold, with nothing to do but dig, and time is not the same weight to them. They had more gold. They did not need to eat the way we do, or sleep, and the snow did not bother them. They could sit on that car until spring. Travis could not. He ran out of clean quarters the first night and started on the change machine, feeding it his crumpled bills. And when the bills ran out, he came to the booth and begged me for rolls of quarters, and I sold him what the machine had, because selling him quarters is not helping him over a line, and then that ran out too. He offered me $500 to walk out to his car and drive it around to the door so he could jump in. I told him I could not leave the booth, and that even if I did, the rules did not make them let go of my car, and did he want to watch what they did to a man who walked out there? He stopped asking after that. By the third day, he looked worse than anything in the building. He had not slept, because sleep meant the dryer stopped. He flinched at the pipes. He talked to himself. He kept the gold pouch clutched to his chest the whole time, like it was the thing keeping him alive instead of the thing killing him. And I think somewhere in his burned out head, he had decided that if he could just hold on long enough, they would give up. Because that is how it works for a man. A man gives up. A man gets bored. A man gets cold. But they were not a man. They were the mountain. And the mountain does not get bored. On the fourth morning, he broke. He was down to loose change, scraped out of the seams of the plastic chairs, feeding the dryer nickels and dimes it would not even take. And the drum stopped, and it stayed stopped, and the buzzer's echo died. And in the silence, he could hear the little clicking sounds the diggers made out on the car, soft and steady, and he started to cry. He took the pouch out of his jacket, and he stood in the open front doors, not stepping past them, and he threw it. He threw the gold out into the muddy slush of the lot as hard as he could, and it landed short of the car and split, and the nuggets and the dust went into the snow. And he screamed out that he was sorry, that they could have it, all of it, that he never meant it, please. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the smallest digger, the one he had stolen from, came down off the hood and went to the split pouch in the snow and gathered it, slow, with those flat, hard fingers, every nugget, sifting the dust up out of the slush, patient, until it had it all. It counted. It looked up at the doorway where Travis stood shaking, and it did not say anything, it just looked. And then it turned and clicked once, and all of them, the whole crowd of them, came down off the car and off the snow and melted back into the tree line the way they had come, and in a minute the lot was empty except for the car and the trampled snow and the cold. Travis did not trust it. He stayed inside until full daylight, standing at the glass, and then he went out to his car in a running crouch and got in and drove down the grade too fast, and I never saw him again. Somebody said later he left the county. Somebody else said other things I do not know. I know that before they left, the smallest digger came back one more time that same winter, alone, and set a single nugget in my tray, apart from the wash money, and unveiled its eyes at me and left, and I understood it was for keeping the peace, for not letting the thing spill blood on the floor and bring the boiler down into all of it. I asked it, before it went, what would have happened if Travis had kept running with the gold, if he had made it to his car and got away. It stopped in the doorway. It looked out at the stone edge of the lot, at the gravel line, and it slid that clear lid across its eyes once, slow, and it did not answer me, and it went out into the snow. That was the winter I finally understood the thing Ada had been trying to tell me since the first night, which is that the rules do not make peace. Peace was never what they were for. The rules make time. They hold a room still for a few hours so that the things inside it do not have to be what they are, and most of them use that time to rest, and some of them use it to settle a debt without blood, and a few of them, the patient ones, use it to wait for the clock to run out on somebody who thought the clock was on his side. The closest the whole place ever came to going over at once was the night the power died, and it is the night that taught me, in my gut and not just off the plate, what the second rule really means. It was a bad blow coming over the pass in the fall, wind loading the hemlock until the big ones let go, and one of them came down across the line up the grade and took the power out for the whole grade with it. When the lights went, they went everywhere. The overhead tubes, the sign, the change machine, and, all at once, every drum in the building. There were 4 guests on the floor that night. 2 of the almost humankind at separate machines, the gray folding woman and one of the full moon ones in the corner running his flannel, and every one of them had a live cycle turning when the dark came down, and every one of those cycles stopped in the same second. The second rule protects a guest only while their drum turns. What I did not understand until that night was that it works the other way too, that it is the turning drum itself that holds them, some old bargain built into the machines. And when every drum in the building stops at the same instant, every guest in the building comes unheld at the same instant. The dark was total. The only light was the little battery thing on my key ring, and far off down the hall, a faint red where the boiler sat behind its door, because the boiler does not run on the county's power and never has. And in that dark, I heard 4 things that had been folding laundry a moment before go still, and it was not the stillness of people folding clothes. I did not move. I could not have found the line in the black anyway, and finding the line was the only thing that mattered. So I sat on the stool with my back against the rear glass, and both hands flat on my knees, and I made myself into furniture. I heard one of them stand. I heard the gray woman say a few words low, not to me, in a language with too many soft sounds in it. I heard the full moon one start to breathe wrong, faster, deeper, the breathing going down toward the change, because the moon was up behind the storm, whether anybody could see it or not. And the only thing that had been keeping him a man in a flannel shirt was a warm drum going around, and the drum had stopped, and the pipes began to tick. I have never been so glad to hear that sound, because the boiler runs on its own, and the boiler was awake, and the boiler did not care that the county's lines were down. It knew the room had gone wrong. The ticking came up into a hiss, and the steel door knocked against its bar down the hall, once, twice, steady, and that sound reached into the dark and touched every one of them as it always does. And I heard the full moon one's breathing hitch and slow and drag itself back from the edge, and I heard whatever had stood up sit back down. The boiler held them, not me. I was furniture in the corner with a keychain light. The old iron thing in the ground held 4 hungry things still in the pitch dark for the 50 longest minutes of my life, until the county truck got the tree cleared and the line back up, and the lights stuttered on, and the machines all chugged back into their cycles at once, and the room was just a laundromat again, 4 guests blinking in the light, going back to their folding like nothing. The gray woman looked at me when the lights came up. She had gotten closer in the dark, a lot closer, close enough to the booth that another few feet would have put her at the line, and she looked at me sitting furniture, still on my stool, and she did a thing she had never done in all the nights she had come. She nodded, like I had passed something. Then she went back to her table and folded the same nothing she always folds, and at dawn she left, and she has never come that close again. I keep a case of the good flashlights in the booth now, and a hand crank radio, and I know the number for the power company by heart, though the county still takes 40 minutes on a good night. But there is no fixing the real problem, which is that the thing that keeps the piece at spin dry runs on quarters, and quarters run out, and drums stop, and the dark comes. And on the far side of every warm turning cycle, there is a moment of stillness waiting, where the whole arrangement comes undone at once. I think about that more than I should. I think the boiler thinks about it too, if it thinks. I think it is the only one of us that is never off the clock, The thirsty boy is a hungry thing, and a hungry thing was at least something I could understand. The dogs and the dead and the diggers all want something with a name on it. The one that rents the crawl space is not like them. He is patient the way the diggers are patient, but there is nothing simple under it, no plain hunger to point to. He is running an experiment, and he has been running it a very long time, and some nights I think the experiment is me. I cannot prove he is what I think he is. He has never said. But he looks exactly like the old vampire from the silent picture, the one they made in Germany 100 years ago, the rat-faced one. Tall past what a tall man is. So tall he has to fold himself under the doorframe. Thin as a coat rack. Bald, with ears that come to points and a skull too long from front to back. And eyes set so deep under the brow that in most light there are just two shadows where eyes should be. His coat goes to the floor. His fingers come down nearly to his knees, and they end in nails like sailmakers' needles, and there are two teeth in the front that rest on his lower lip. The first time he came, it was an hour before dawn, and a long black car came up the grade with no plates and no sound, older than any car has a right to be, and he unfolded himself out of it and came to the doors and stopped just inside, the way the boy stops, waiting. I have thought about that since, that the oldest and worst of them wait to be let in, and I never once told him to come in, and he came in anyway. So maybe the waiting is just manners, or maybe it is another test, and I passed it by keeping my mouth shut. He did not want a washer, he wanted the crawl space. There is a hatch in the floor at the back of the room, past the last dryer, a square of boards with a recessed ring pole, and under it is the crawl space that runs beneath the whole building, dirt and pipe and dark. Ada rents it to him. I did not know that until he came, and I got on the phone, and Ada answered and said his name in a way that was not really a name, and told me to give him the hatch and cover the low windows before noon, and then leave him be. He paid in coins that were not silver and were not gold, and were older than either. And he asked me, that first night, with the key to the hatch sitting in the tray between us, if I would be so kind as to bring it around to him, since his hands were full. His hands were empty. I said the tray was as far as I went. He looked at me for a long moment out of those two shadows, and then he smiled, just a little, the two teeth coming down, and he picked the key up off the tray with one long nail and folded down through the hatch into the dark, and I did not see him again until the next night. He does not wash clothes. I worked out what he does down there my first winter with him, and I wish I had not. He runs the dryers. Only the dryers. Only the big high heat ones, and only at 3 a.m, and he does not bring laundry up the steps to load them. He brings it up from below, through the hatch, in the wooden trunk. What he takes out of the trunk and puts in the dryer is not clothing. It has the shape of clothing when he hangs it after, draped over his long arm, soft and pale and worked thin, but it is not cloth, and once I had put together what it was, in my own head, I did not get to take it apart again. He dries them, so they stay soft. So they stay, he told me once, when I was fool enough to ask, workable. He is a tailor. That is the closest word. He has been making the same suit for a long time, and it always needs more of the same material, and he comes up out of the ground to press and cure the pieces where the machines run hot and nobody asks, and then he goes back down to his work. When he is here, the whole place is wrong for 3 or 4 nights. Rats gather at the retaining wall. There is scratching under the floor in rooms that sit on poured concrete where nothing should be able to scratch. The chrome dryer doors go dull and take a stain that will not wipe off until he leaves. The dead will not come those nights. Even the diggers, who live in the dark, will not go near the hatch. And he comes up into the lobby after midnight and stands at the yellow line on the far side of it, close enough that his coat brushes the paint, and he tries to get me across. He does not want to drink me, I think. Not mainly. He could find blood easier and closer than a night clerk, behind bulletproof glass. He wants me to step over the line, on my own. He wants the willing step, same as the boy wants it, because whatever holds them off the willing is the last real law, older than the boiler, older than the salt and the iron and the graveyard dirt, and a thing that has lived as long as he has does not want blood so much as it wants to prove the law can be broken. So he works me. He is good at it. He drops the hatch key and asks me to fetch it. He leaves the wooden trunk at the edge of the floor and says it is too heavy for him. Would I help him carry it down? An old man, look at my hands. Once the pipes had a leak, a real one, water coming up through the floor, and his voice came from under the boards saying it was bad down here. Would I come look? Once, and it nearly worked. I heard Ada calling my name from the back hall in Ada's own voice, tired and cross, telling me to quit sitting on my hands and come help her with the boxes. And Ada was 200 miles away in Bend at her sister's, and I knew it, and I still had one foot off the stool before I caught myself. He never gets angry when I refuse. He smiles the small smile, folds the 2 teeth away, and goes back down the hatch, and the next night he tries something new. The boy is weather, and weather I can plan around. This one is a mind, and it has all the time there is. The night it went bad, there was a girl, not one of ours, an ordinary tired teenager, 18 maybe, driving home alone from somewhere to somewhere with a back seat full of dorm laundry, and she had missed the interstate in the fog and followed the one red sign and come in to wash a comforter that would not fit in her machine at home. It was late, past 2, and the tailor was up and standing at his line, and I had been keeping half an eye on him and half on her and telling myself she would be gone before it mattered. She loaded the big washer. She ran it, and while it ran, she sat down on the bench by the folding tables with her hood up and her legs pulled up, and she was asleep before the wash hit the spin cycle, the deep gone sleep of a kid who has been driving too long. And her cycle ended. The washer clicked off, and the drum stopped, and the room went quiet, and she did not wake up to move her wash to the dryer, and the second rule let go of her while she slept. The tailor knew the second it happened. He turned his long head toward the bench, and he began to hum. It was low, barely a sound, more felt than heard, a rhythm to it, a clicking down inside the hum like a nail-tapping bone, and it filled the room slow the way cold fills a room. The girl's face changed in her sleep, smoothed out, and she stood up. Her eyes were open, but they were not seeing the room. They were seeing wherever the hum was telling her to go, and she stepped over her own shoes and started walking, slow, easy, toward the back of the room, toward the hatch, and I saw that the hatch was standing open, a black square on the floor, and I had not seen him open it. I could not go get her. Everything in me came up off that stool to go get her, and I got both hands on the counter, and I did not cross the line, because the second I crossed it, I was meat in the lot, and there would be 2 of us down that hole instead of 1, and I knew it even with her walking toward the dark. Calling her name did nothing. The hum had her. She was 10 feet from the hatch and closing, and the tailor had gone down onto the top step of it, folded down into the opening with his long arms up out of it, waiting, his face turned up, patient, the 2 teeth down and the small smile on. And I remembered the button. There is a red button under a plastic guard on the wall of the booth, and Ada had never told me what it was, and I had never asked. And I had 4 years of not asking sitting in me when I flipped that guard up and hit it with the flat of my hand. It is the fire alarm, the main one wired to the horn, up under the roof line, and it went off like the end of the world, a flat electric scream that filled every inch of that building at once and bounced off the cinder block and came back, and in the wall the pipes woke up and the copper hissed, and the steel door slammed against its bar, all of it at once, the alarm and the boiler both. The girl came awake, standing up. She stumbled, caught herself on a dryer, looked around at the screaming light and the noise with no idea in the world how she had gotten there on her feet 6 feet from a hole in the floor. And I was already at the grill yelling at her over the horn to get her clothes and get in her car and go. Go now. And something in my voice got through where the hum had gotten through a minute before, because she grabbed her wet comforter dripping out of the washer and ran out the doors into her car. And she was down the grade in reverse half the way with her lights swinging before I even let go of the button. The tailor did not flinch at the alarm. He came up out of the hatch, slow, unfolding, and he stood there in the screaming red light with his coat around him, and he looked at me across the whole room, across the yellow line and the bulletproof glass, and he smiled all the way this time, and he inclined his long head at me, just slightly, the way one card player tips his hand to another when a hand is over, well played, and he stepped down into the hatch and pulled it shut over his head. And I stood there with my palm still on the button and the horn still screaming, and I did not take it off for a long time. Ada came up the next day and I told her, and she did not act surprised, which by then did not surprise me. She went in the back and came out with a shoebox of old photographs, and she found one and slid it under the glass. It was the building, newer, the paint fresh, a fat old car out front, and 4 people standing in the lot squinting at the sun, the way people stand in old pictures. On the back, in pencil, it said the year 1954, and it said, "Keep the low windows covered." And at the edge of the group of 4, half in the shade of the building, too tall, folded a little to fit the frame, was the man from the crawl space, in the same coat, with the same long hands, looking exactly as he had looked at me the night before across the alarm. He still comes. 2 or 3 times a year the long black car comes up the grade with no sound, and I cover the low windows before noon. And for 3 or 4 nights, the dryers run hot at 3 in the morning, and the rats come to the wall, and the mirrors stain. He still stands at the line. Not long ago he tried the leaking pipe again, the same trick, lazy, like he was not even trying, and when I did not move he stood there a while in no hurry, and then he asked me a question instead. He asked if I ever got tired of being careful, and I told him no. And he smiled, and he said that anybody can be careful for one night, and then he folded down into the dark, and I have not been able to get the sound of him saying it out of my head since, because he is right, and being right is the most dangerous thing he has ever done to me. I have been doing this 4 years now. Ada is older and comes up the grade less, and she has started talking to me about the ledger like she means for me to keep it someday, and I have not told her yes, and I have not told her no. My knee still aches on the cold nights. The truck finally died, and I bought a better one with money from a job I cannot explain to anybody, and I park it around back by the little apartment, and most mornings I sleep fine now, which is its own kind of warning. People ask me, the few who know anything, why I do not just leave. It is a fair question, and I have turned it over on a lot of slow nights. The pay is good, and the room is warm, and there is nothing waiting for me down in the valley but a church lot and a memory of sleeping in a cab, and those are real reasons, but they are not the reason. The reason is that I have learned how the place keeps people alive, and I do not believe the next person up the grade would learn it fast enough. Ada made me read the Gone pages my first week, so I would be scared, and it worked, and I cannot hand this booth to some kid who has not sat with those pages and will be used to the gray woman inside a month. Somebody has to be the one who is not used to it. For now, that is me. In 4 years behind that glass, I have figured out that nobody up here dies of the monsters. Not really. Everybody who is in the ledger under the word gone died of the same thing, and it was not teeth. It was the second night. It was the 100th. Anybody can be careful for one night. A person walks into a room full of wrong things, and every nerve is awake, and the fear does all the work, and they do everything right without being told. It is the coming back that does the killing. It is the night I have done it so many times that my hands know the job, and my mind is somewhere else. The night the old woman drops the ring, and I am already reaching before I remember what she is. The night I have heard the pipes tick so often that they are just the building settling. The night the boy in the rain looks so cold and so small, and I have watched him not cross that line 1,000 times. So surely just this once. The monsters do not need to beat me. They only need me to come back enough times that one night I forget I am afraid. They have all the nights there are. That is what every one of them is betting on, the boy and the dogs and the dead family and the mountain and the tall thing under the floor. Not my throat, my habit. So I do not let it become habit. I read the 5 rules off the plate at the start of every shift, out loud even though I could say them asleep, especially because I could say them asleep. I keep both hands where I can see them. I sweep the night's little offerings out from behind the line at dawn without ever letting my fingers pass the paint, and they go in the can, on top of a gold ring I will never touch again, and the can is heavier every season. I do not throw the stick for the young dog no matter how much my arm wants to. I do not answer the tall thing when it asks me its questions, even the ones that are true, because the true ones are the ones that get in. And when I catch my body starting to lean, when I feel the years of quiet nights trying to walk my hand toward that line for some cold, sweet, reasonable thing on the other side of the glass, I sit down on the stool and I put both hands under my legs, and I wait for it to pass, the way Ada taught me, the way the man before me must not have. It is almost midnight now. The last of the daylight people left an hour ago, an old boy from Toll Creek with a basket of work shirts who told me the same fishing story he always tells, and I made his change and I laughed in the right places, and I saw him drive down the grade into the dark, and I hope he never has a reason to come back after the token machine locks. The fog is coming down off the pass the way it does. Half the sign is lit and half of it is dark, and from the road it says a word that is not quite a word. In the wall behind me, the copper is quiet, for now. Down the hall, the steel door sits still on its bar. The drums are all stopped and the room is clean, and the yellow line goes all the way around me, bright and gritty and whole. The machine ticks over and the bolt drops, and the doors lock themselves for the night. And out on Route 22, faint, coming up the grade through the fog and the wet trees, I can hear the first set of headlights on the road. I check that my hands are where I can see them. I settle onto the stool. I do not cross the line. And I wait to see what wants its clothes cleaned tonight.